So you can ask them to read a whole bunch of stuff, in 1 week, and then have them work on a project for 2 or 3 weeks, and you'd have the rats much less frequent, and I think that would obviously work.
Okay, so let's open it to general questions. Somebody have one?
I just wanted you to re-say what you said about student decision about course credit, and I was a little unclear about what you said about that.
They can drop until the middle of the 9th week of the semester. On my syllabus say, ask them, and I ask them in the 3rd week and the 4th week, if you think you are going to drop this course, now is the time to do it. So I simply ask people who aren't sure that they're going to stay to make a decision,
right,
and either go or stay. Because I think one of the things that our NAEP update does is it tells students they don't have to get serious. Oh, and what I have my students do for their application projects, by the way, were posters. And so I have a few examples of these posters. They had to work together. We had a poster session at the end. You don't have to read these. But they were working on the same topic. As you can see, some teams have, real gift for design and so forth. And there is a jury prize. So not only is there an issue of, your shame is public, but also, one team does in fact get special recognition.
And what do you give out for
Usually like a $5 gift card at the bookstore. So not a lot. The biggest team was 7. I had no team smaller than 4, and that's because of the sections. We created the teams in sections, and sections had different numbers of students. Teams had different sizes. So it wasn't a huge expenditure of money. I figured if I got 7, and as it turned out, one of my team of 7 won. But if it hadn't, then I would have had a couple of gift store cards to books. I would have given them to my AIs actually. Right.
But the decision about the course credit, that's strictly about them dropping earlier versus later, as opposed to them deciding, I'm weighting the test this way and weighting the assessments. Do they still do the weighting? Students, you let them choose in groups, kind of how they want to do that?
No, I don't. Because, I don't want them deciding that, their 3 poster projects are 10% each.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think the posters are really where I get to see whether they understand the big concepts I want them to understand, and whether they can, what kind of progress they're making towards thinking this story.
Would it be too complex of a scenario where you give them limits on where they can weight them? And I try all kinds of those things, and then students like, what now exactly?
Yeah, partly they think it's my job. That's not a reason not to do it. But I also think that's a form follows function kind of thing. In a business environment, that makes a good deal of sense. You're going to be figuring out where you put your priorities, and you're going to be operating this company, and you have to figure out strategies and all that sort of stuff. So that kind of reasoning, I think, is good in a business course. I didn't see the function of it in history course.
So if we were going to look at your class, what would a typical class look like? How much would you lecture? How much are they in their teams? What does it look like? What are the teams doing? Could you just give us a feel? That means we need to make a rule of that.
Okay. In discussion section, they are always in their teams. This was a course with discussion sections. And that was a little complicated, but, my AIs were great. The graduate students in this institution are fabulous. They just really are, and they're very teaching-oriented. They did a hell of a lot more work than they're usually asked to do, and they did it willingly and happily and all of that. But in the larger class, we alternate between working on and discussing a problem as a whole, and having them work on a problem as a team. So I might give them, for instance, a passage from a reading that they haven't read, and ask them to talk among themselves and to write down. I found out anytime I want them to actually do some work, I have to ask them to turn in a product. down how they think the reading applies to this particular passage. And that's just an additional check. We do take those in. We didn't, we gave them back, but didn't grade them. So, they got the feedback and that, but not a grade.
Leah, if you found team sizes to have any bearing on performance, I mean, you said that the 7-person team won, but what seems to be the sweet spot?
5. I had some larger teams that worked really well. But I would say that the bigger the team, the more the issue of free riding comes up.
Right.
And even though I had them fill out a questionnaire, a 2-question questionnaire for each person in their team, they got a sheet and it said, what has, Joan done to contribute, what is the most important thing Joan contributed to your team's post, workout poster? What is the one thing Joan could do to be a better member of the team? With no numeric things attached to it. And then we read through those and we assigned a multiplier. In most cases, a multiplier of 1, I have to say. But, we would get things, when we asked them how, and we did it 3 times during the semester, this can't be a one-off, because if it's one-off, what we found was they'd say nice things and then they would complain to us about the people who didn't do work. And we would say, well, why didn't you say that? Well, by the second poster, they're pissed off. And we'll get things like, this so-and-so should actually come to class. Or he just sits and texts during our discussion. He should pay attention. So we actually got some really pretty good information. And the second time, we did not assign tough multipliers. I don't think we assigned anything sort of lower than, point, 0.8. But the student also got feedback and was told, your team members are saying you're not contributing sufficiently. And then the third time, the chips fell where they may, which was the final. And some people were greatly surprised, I have to say, even in the final, to discover that their teammates did not think they contributed.
One of the syllabi that I read on the evaluations gave instructed the groups, they still did the feedback, they instructed the groups that you have 100 points to distribute among everybody. And I thought to employ that, but put a minimum of this and a maximum of that. And that would be then, based on those, that would be your 5% of your grade, plus my own take.
We tried it.
Did you try that?
Depends on how much whinging you want to hear.
Okay, do you also have too diverse of a population in order to do that? Because when I'm using it, it's only 2 majors. It's 2 majors, and they're senior juniors, so they're pretty homogeneous.
We asked Michelson about that when he was here 2 years ago. And what he said was, there is a way that everybody can get the same grade. And it involves collaboration. You organize the grades, so that everyone gives, one person 27, one person 26, one person 25, whatever. I mean, I can't do it in my head. But, and you rotate that. And in a business context, that's a perfectly sensible answer. But I would get students who would say, everybody in my team was just great. Why can't we all get an A for participation? And we don't think that I don't think that participation actually is separable from product. If everybody works really hard, but it's a crappy product, So we went with the multiplier instead, which says, well, it may have been a crappy product, but some people contributed more than others, and if you didn't contribute, then you even deserve less credit than we gave the project as a whole. We only had one stinker this time out of how many teams did we have? I think we ended up with 19 teams.